I am thrilled to have Nicole joining me on this episode. Nicole and I met through Crescent City Lights Youth Theater, which was a local children's theater here in the city of New Orleans. That's where I started off just doing anything theater when I was doing theater. But I also just recently found out that Nicole, she graduated from my high school the year before I joined as a freshman. I don't know how I missed that, but now I know. First off, let's kind of reminisce on Crescent City Lights a little bit. I remember you like the intern. I think you were the intern.
Yes. I was an intern. Oh my gosh, that was so many moons ago. I think I was like a sophomore in college or going into my junior year in college when that was happening. I was definitely home for the summer. And that's when I first met you. I remember Julie was like over the program at that point in time. And I think you guys were doing like the kid version of Bugsy Malone.
Yes. I thought there was only a kid. Wait, there's an adult version of Bugsy Malone?
I don't know.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, no, Bugsy Malone is definitely, at least from what I remember, it's like all kids and they just act like adults.
When I was in like middle school and high school, I also did plays at Gallier Hall. And so like it was just so synchronistic to like come back and then be an intern in the theater. And then like even now fast forward to like us being on this podcast together. It's just like, I know. It's like when you are aligned, like it's just, it's amazing. I also want to point out, you probably forgot, but you did know that I went to Dominican, but you found out a couple of years ago, we had like the scandal.
Oh,
yeah. Remember, we were all in the group message together. And like,
You right. Yeah. So I don't know if I've ever mentioned this on the podcast, everyone, but I'm just going to be a little brief with it because, that's a whole other story. But
it is.
Basically what happened at our high school, this was after we both graduated, but there was a senior and her father who dressed up as Kaepernick and Trump. And they like, I think there was a Snapchat photo that was like leaked or like passed around where like the daughter was kneeling like Kaepernick and the father was like pointing their finger down at the daughter who was also playing Kaepernick. And it, became a big thing on the news and everything. And yeah, it definitely, how those predominantly white Catholic schools try to, just kind of push it under the rug and, yeah, it was a lot. So that's what happened. Definitely can have a whole nother episode about that. Let's just be real. But, So since then, what have you been doing? I know you're in LA now, but I know you're doing a lot of awesome things out there too, like acting and like everything. You're multi-hyphenated like me. So I understand that life.
Yes, honey.
Yeah. So tell audience, what are you doing right now?
All right, y'all, let me break it down. Follow me if you can. So like Jessica said, I am considered a multi-hyphenate talent. So that means we got all the slashes. And so my slashes are actress, singer, songwriter, producer, content creator. I am also the curator and owner of the Goddess Bath Experience. I'm a podcaster as well. I have a podcast called Nyx at Night with a fellow multi-hyphenate talent. It's called Nyx at Night, and her name is also Nicole. And so like we do like just pop culture types of things. We bring the OG millennial spin. So I love being on the Self-Aware Millennial show.
Yes, we'll have to do like a collab soon too. That'd be so much fun.
Yes, I would love to. And so within all of those things, being a multi-hyphenate, you ebb and flow out of those hyphens, right? You ebb and flow out of that. And so this has really been a big year in spite of everything that's going on with COVID. Currently, this is what's happening with me. I have a feature film that I am a lead in and also a producer on that is on Amazon Prime. It's called 5 Women in the End. It was self-produced by our squad, and it's so incredible. It's a female-driven story. We have a female writer, female director. Our DP was female transgender, and like we were representing for the women. We just won our first award this year, so super excited about that. Check that out on Amazon Prime. I'll make sure I send you the link so we can put that in the show notes for you guys to check out. Leave us a review, please. Thanks.
Hey, all right.
Because that helps us get funding for the next one.
Exactly. Yes. Well, that is so inspirational. Like, I'm really excited and happy for you. And I'm so happy to, like, honored to have you here to talk about our topic of discussion, which will be Hurricane Katrina, which is actually very interesting and different for both of us. As everyone already knows, through the stuff that you heard just at the beginning, I evacuated with my family. I was in 8th grade, and yeah, we had a very interesting adventure to get to kind of our displaced spot for the next couple of months. But let's talk about your experience a little bit. Mm-hmm. So let's kind of give them a little setting. You were just starting college, right?
Yes. Yeah. And I'm so excited to talk about this side of the coin because I had just left New Orleans the week before. Yeah. I just moved first week of college. At the time I was attending ULL. I eventually transferred to BGSU the year after. But so I was only 2 hours away in Lafayette, University of Louisiana at Lafayette.
Yeah.
And at the time, and it's shifted now and it's kind of sad, but St. Aug's like Jamboree was like, it was the thing. It was the event of the season to kick off the fall school year. Your parents was there, your mom and them, your aunties, all your cousins, all your friends. And if you were a local
family reunion.
Exactly. And if you were a local, not high schooler, but if you're a local person that went to college somewhere in the area, you definitely came back to talk about like your first week of like college. Like it was like a rite of passage to do. And so I was really excited about coming home. And I remember I was putting my stuff in the car and I called my dad to let him know I was on the way. And he was like, hey, don't come. We're actually evacuating. There's a category 4 rolling through. The city's shutting down. There's not going to be a jamboree. Stay where you are. He's like, we're actually going to be coming up your direction because we're packing up to leave. He's like, but don't worry. You know how it goes. They'll reschedule it for next weekend. So come next weekend. And as history knows, that never happened.
No, it did not.
It never happened.
Yeah. So how did the evacuation announcement from your dad, I guess, how did it make you feel? Like, what were your thoughts, the initial thoughts?
My initial thoughts, it was like, it was like, oh, category 4, whatever, only because the year prior, my senior year, and I don't know what grade you would have been in, Jessica, to remember.
I would have been in 7th grade.
Okay. It was a really active hurricane season. Yes. And we were out of school so much that school year that they basically they cut our Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays short because we had surpassed all of our hurricane days that are typically built in. And because we were literally evacuating every other week. I don't know. That's what I was like asking. I don't know if you remember. And so like, it was false alarm after false alarm after false alarm. And so it felt like, okay, we went through this last year. Y'all gonna leave. It's gonna just miss us again. And then we'll be back to regularly scheduled programming. But now we know that was like birthing pains, really. Like the year before was like, it was showing us that like, hey, we're back in this season where every 50 to 60 years you get that blowout, because this is also what happened when we had Betsy. This is before both of us was born. And I remember hearing about that from my great grandmothers and my grandmothers growing up. And so
just for the audience,
this pattern before.
For the audience, I want to let y'all know Hurricane Betsy, I believe it rolled through. It was kind of like the Katrina equivalent back in like the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't think people evacuated at that point. So a lot of people were just kind of chilling in their houses that like had like 5-6 feet of water. Like people were just chilling in boats and everything. Like it was interesting.
That was the storm that prompted them to have an evacuation plan for the city. And that was also the storm where they blew the levees. That was the first time it happened, and they flooded the lower 9th ward. That was the first time all of that had happened, because that's where a lot of Black wealth was, because all of my grandparents owned property there. and they did, but Katrina took them out. Like that is that whole area, and going towards Chalmette, like going towards the parish, that was all Black owned property and neighborhoods that have been around from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. And so they would flood those areas to save downtown. They would flood all the Black neighborhoods. And that's when they blew the levees. So that's when the start of like having evacuation plans started after Betsy, because people died a lot and people were on their roofs having to be rescued. My great grandmother was one of them. She was on the roof. We had pictures. Katrina took those. We had pictures in my grandmother's house of them on the roof getting rescued, getting into boats. And so we had seen this story before, and I venture to say we'll see it again, unfortunately. But it was history repeating itself in a very different way.
So for everyone that's listening that is from New Orleans, which I do believe we have a lot of people that are from New Orleans who can relate, but people that don't, in terms of the evacuation situations that we have, like a lot, especially I remember at least having an evacuation almost like every other week, if I'm not mistaken, or like every month. It would be really bad. And I'm just like, oh, for us, like we call it a hurricane, because usually what happens is like it'll pass through and nothing happens, and then you just go back to normal for a little bit, and then you got to leave again. This all happens between normally like at the beginning of the school year, let's say up until like maybe mid to end September, and then after when October hits, like we're pretty much in the clear for the rest of the year. But yeah, this time I would say like maybe between the years of 2004 and 2007, 2008 was like when we had a lot of storms. So just to kind of briefly kind of discuss what happened with me during that same time, I was, as I said, in a I was in a 9-car caravan with 17 of my family members. We all decided to evacuate together. In terms of the traffic, it was bumper to bumper for a long time, because everybody's trying to get out at the same time. I remember it being very interesting as a child because, we would just try to be creative and like try to find fun ways of keeping ourselves entertained. And so I remember we would be like driving and like, well, not even drive, we would be stand still, right? And the rest stops were packed with people. But when we were on the road, it was like, it felt like a big old block party, because people just couldn't go anywhere. So people had like their coolers, they'd be passing each other drinks. Me and my sisters, we would just like draw little things and like write fun little questions that people on the like to the side of us in the car could answer like quickly. Like we would like say like, how are you doing today? And like just like leave so they could read it, and they'll like usually answer. Like it was fun. And like we would like show off our dog that we had at the time, and like it was interesting. We made the fun out of it. But then we ended up going to Alabama, which makes no sense in my brain why we went to Alabama, because that's where the storm was hitting. Like it was going towards Alabama, but that's where we decided to stop. I think we were trying to go further. We were trying to go somewhere in that situation to try to get out of the eye of the storm and like the craziness of it. But we just ended up not being able to do so. We stopped at this place in Alabama. I think it might have even been Gulfport, which Gulfport's not in Alabama, but it's somewhere in Alabama that's not far from like the Gulf of Mexico or like the shore or whatever. And we stayed there like maybe 3 days or something like that while the storm was there. We didn't have any power. This hotel was completely shut down, boards up and everything. And we were just almost like abandoned there. Thankfully we had food. We had like like evacuation food. Like my favorite one of choice was the what do you call those things? It's not Spam, but it's the other one.
I know what you're talking about.
The ones are kind of like little hot dogs in the little
Vienna sausage.
Vienna sausages. Yeah. Ooh.
Girl, I haven't had those in so long, and I can't even believe I ever used to eat those things. Oh my God.
I still have a love for them. I don't eat them anymore, but like I just remember that time when you were hungry, it was like it felt like a 5-course meal. every time.
Yeah, because they were the hurricane snacks, like you said. My grandmother, anytime we left, like those are the things. You had your saltine crackers, you had your Vienna sausages. She used to pack like the sardines. I didn't eat sardines at the time, but like, yeah, like you had sardines, your hurricane, little like your hurricane kits. You had your fruit, that's like your peel fruit that lasts for a little bit longer, your canned goods. Like it's a whole thing. And you brought a memory back for me that I hadn't thought about in a long time, just like the evacuation ride. I remember doing so many of those as a child with the family. The same thing, you're caravanning across states and your state. It's like, it's crazy. And as a kid, it's like vacation. We don't have school. We got no school for a couple of days, but you're not really thinking in like, I may not ever go back to my home again. I think that's what shifted for us all, was like the reality of like we could lose our entire city one day. And I think it grew us, our age group, I think it grew us up real quick. And it rooted us in like our culture in a way that we didn't take in really, because we're just kids in New Orleans growing up. And I think that was the turning point for me to really, I feel like I'm gonna tear up.
Oh, that's okay. You tear up. It's okay.
That was really the turning point for me to recognize how special New Orleans is and how much the world loves our city that we call home. Yeah. And like to like be faced with the reality of never going back, like not taking out like losing your house, right? Because that happens. People experience certain things happen where there's fires or flooding or whatever. But the reality of losing an entire city that's attached to so much culture and history was like, it was like nothing else that you could ever experience unless you were a native going through it at that time. And it bonded us in such a way that's really unique and special. And I feel blessed to have gone through that experience, because there was a shift culturally in our people after that. Like it really, it shifted us in a way. And then what happened after that, going to the Super Bowl, you know, after that was just, it was really magic, y'all. Like in New Orleans, the next couple of years after that, it was really something really special and unique that I feel like I'm so happy I got the privilege to live through. Memories I will carry forever and share forever. So
yeah, and I like still live here. Like I'm still like I feel that way even though I live here. And if I go anywhere, I've gone to plenty of places now that like had other jobs that I've had the privilege of like getting a chance to travel around the world, but it's nothing like here at all. You know, we have our own niche, our own thing. You know, we're not necessarily like the best city in terms of like, we're still learning how to be like great in certain ways and like things that inclusive. And you know, we have a high Black population here that a lot of them still don't get the resources that they need. Like we still have a lot of work to do, but overall culturally I think we definitely have something that no one else ever does, and people from all around the world come right here to New Orleans because they want to be a part of it. So I want, how do I transition out of this?
Girl.
So yeah, after 3 days, we decide, okay, the storm has passed. We can finally try to find somewhere else to go. We went to Jackson, Mississippi for like 2 more weeks. And then we ended up going to, oh gosh, no, you know what happened? I lost my cousin. One of my cousins I lost because there was remnants of Katrina, and they were driving through the storm. They're like in Atlanta, I believe, like Georgia. And they get in a car accident and we lose them. And I remember they had their funeral back in Baton Rouge. Baton Rouge is about an hour and a half outside New Orleans. So we had to drive all the way back. We drove from Mississippi all the way back to Baton Rouge for the funeral. And then we went back to Mississippi for a little bit. And then we went up to Illinois where my older sister was getting her master's. And that's where we stayed for the next 3 months. So, I think about so many people that were lost during Hurricane Katrina that couldn't even get out the city. And I know my story, even though it's not the best, like I know it's not the worst either, because I know so many people that had it much worse than I did. And you know, I feel for them. And I know at that time in my life too, like I knew I was more fortunate. I knew that there were friends of mine that were still in New Orleans that just, you know, stayed, and they stayed at the Superdome for I don't know how many days, because people that couldn't get out stayed at the Dome.
That was always the last, that in the convention center.
Yeah.
That's like the last, what is it called? Last resort, like the last place you can be when it's too late to evacuate and you can't be on the roads. They pack out the Dome and the convention center.
Yeah. And it was a mess, because there was people like just kind of, they found their way to the interstate, because the interstate was basically closed down. So they closed it down by just like chilling on the interstate, and just like, you know, people were there too. It was very, and I think this was after the storm had hit, I think.
Yeah, because initially the storm passes. I remember, obviously, we were tracking it like crazy. Yeah. And then eventually where I was, because the thing about Katrina, she was a big, excuse my French, she was big, y'all. Like, she was a big biatch. She covered a lot of territory. And so, like, even me being 2 hours away in Lafayette, we ended up having to evacuate Lafayette, and we went to Houston. So we were caravanning. That's where
a lot of people went.
Yeah, we all went to Houston, and it was crazy, because as it kept getting closer, it was affecting so many areas. And by the time it passed, I remember we had hit Shreveport. We were still, it was passing through New Orleans. We were barely like missing like outer bands, making it to Houston. And I remember we were watching it, and all of a sudden we were sitting down at a restaurant eating, and it was packed. Like you said, all the gas stations and stuff. We were sitting down eating. It was at night, and I will never forget, because this is when the shit hit the fan. I'm so sorry if I'm not supposed to curse on here. I apologize.
No, you good. Please curse.
Okay. we were all sitting there, and we're watching it, and we literally were watching the news at the exact moment the levees broke all over the city. And it was so hard, because everybody started crying, because you could just see the water, like they were getting it from the helicopters. It was just flooding the entire city and just filling so quickly. And we're like watching our city go underwater, and like in real time. It was devastating in a way. It was like watching one of those disaster films, but it was real life. We're like sitting there, and at this point in time, we're so bad. You know how when it's a bad hurricane and you're evacuating, the phones don't work because everybody's trying to call, so it's just busy signals.
I remember that.
We didn't know where our families were. We knew everybody was getting out. We didn't know where anybody was. And so like that next day to 2 days was rough. And I remember this was when Facebook was just for college, and it just popped off. We had all got on Facebook, and that's how we found a lot of people, because we were in college. So we all got on Facebook at the time. And that's how we found a lot of people, and where a lot of people's families, or we were helping each other find each other's families.
Dang.
It was a crazy, and that's just when the storm hit. And I know we're going to get to like on the other side of it. So we're still talking about the first couple of days, y'all. The things that went down after is still, stay tuned. Keep listening to this podcast.
So in terms of timeline, because this is where my memory does not necessarily serve me very well. How many days after the storm hit did the levees break? Do you remember?
I feel like from what I remember, it was either within hours after the storm passed, or definitely within the first 28 to 48 hours. It wasn't a long time after, because we were in the evacuation process. Like we hadn't even made it to our destination. We were like on the way somewhere. Yeah. So I feel like but the storm had passed. It wasn't Katrina that brought the water in. The levees broke because they were not sufficient enough to hold back that water in our pump systems. We already know we get a hard rain and it's a disaster. So it's just our systems, unfortunately, we're not equipped, and I don't know why, because we know what it is. They weren't equipped, and the levee structures weren't strong enough to hold that water back. And, you know, to be honest, I don't know if we will ever build anything to really keep water out, because when Mother Nature wants to move, it's going to move. Like, water is very powerful and it's unpredictable. There's only so much us as humans can do to hold. And that's not just with water, that's with all the elements, that's with all of these natural storms and disasters. There's only so much we can do, but get out of its way or wait it out. Like, that's also the reality. The sad reality is, like, we live in a place over time, we probably won't see it in our lifetime, but at some point, most of our coastal cities will be gone. Nature will reclaim it. And so we're just, you know, fighting time, essentially.
Yeah. That's why I don't want to buy a property here. I kind of want to find somewhere in the secluded woods, somewhere really nice, and, you know, give me a little something there. But again, that's another subject for another day.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to mention, because you brought it up, you know, having to like see it happen. You're watching the water as it comes in. I don't honestly remember knowing about the water. Or remember, like, I don't remember. I know we watched the news like crazy once we find. Oh, you know what it was? You know what it was? Because we didn't have like any power for days. So I missed all of that. That's what it was. We missed all of that information. And, you know, the phones at the time, like, we didn't have, like, you know, we couldn't look at the
internet. We didn't have it on our,
So we didn't really hear about it. I think maybe someone got a phone call somewhere, or because I remember we were already in Mississippi by the time I remember any sort of recollection of the water or the you know, the levees breaking. And I remember we were trying to figure out for the longest if water had gotten into our house. And we stayed in Holly Grove at the time, and which is an area that doesn't get nearly as much water as other areas of town, but like it's still obviously capable of that. But like from what we were hearing on the news, like almost everywhere had water.
Everywhere.
So yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And so I was like, I remember before we evacuated, I played on the computer a lot. So I was playing like Sims and like all the other stuff, but like we also had like Google and everything. So like there was some cool like little apps that were starting to happen on, like this was after. So I think this was also around the time like where we stopped using Ask Jeeves and we started going on Google. And I remember Google also had this like application called Google Earth. And I was starting to just like want to play around with it. And I'm like, oh, this is cool. Like, yeah, that's our house. Like I'm looking around and like just seeing like, you know, if they got everything accurate. And they did. So like after a while, as we were watching the levees break and everything, or like just watching the news, they were really trying to find out if our area had water. I was like, oh, I could Google Earth it and see. At this point, I think this might have been a couple of weeks in. Because sometimes they don't update it after, they have to update it.
And actually Katrina was one of the reasons that Google's like their satellite images of neighborhoods and all that got so advanced. Like we are the reason for that. They were developing that technology during that time that pushed the envelope for them, because that was one of the ways that the government and FEMA was tracking which neighborhoods, how they could get to people that was possibly still stuck in those areas in their homes. Wow. Like, yeah. So much history attached to Katrina.
I was just using Google Earth for like fun, but I was like, now I can use it to figure out if we have water. So my dad had a tow truck at the time, and you know, it was kind of tall. So like we saw only the top of his tow truck from the pictures. We saw the water there, and like the stop sign, like pretend this is the stop sign. The water was like right here, like really close. And we're like, oh yeah, we got water. And so
everybody got water. It was.
So, you know, knowing that, I remember there was a moment in time where like, I think I finally emotionally broke because I realized things weren't going to be the same, or like, you want to just go back to my regular life. I remember like maybe I was folding my clothes up and like putting it in I don't know, probably like my luggage or something, and or just like being around, like, okay, here's the other thing, being around family, you know, sometimes you don't have personal space, and it's like all of us are crammed in one or two like hotel rooms, and it was just really hard. And I was just like, I want my room back. I want all, like, and I remember just breaking down and crying for a little bit. And I think that's really the only time I allowed myself to release like that. Otherwise, like, you know, I felt like I had to stay strong for everybody and just like try to, you know, figure things out. I would say of the people that I was with, I was a more like tech savvy person. So like anything they needed tech wise, like they would come to me like, hey, can you look this up, or like find this, call this person, da da da. Like they would always run to me. So yeah, it's just a lot more elements to it than just like losing your city, you know. For me,
yeah,
I'm a very adventurous person, so I don't mind the adventure of being out and about, but like I like having the security of knowing I have a home to go back to. So yeah,
I think that was the hardest part too, because I lost all of my grandparents' homes. And so like the sense of like having family homes to go back to, like grandparents' homes, like that was gone. And especially for the older population, a lot of, at least for my generation, a lot of our grandparents after that, and because it took so long to get back in the city, they had all moved in with our parents. And so like the family dynamics shifted in a really, really big way. And I think about all the like the pictures that were lost and the home videos that were lost, like the memories that we don't get back. It was just like, you know, there is no like going back into my grandmother's home and being like, oh my God, this is like that Christmas when we da 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 da. Like it was just, and what happened to the older population in those areas, like, you know, eminent domain was real after that. Those people came in and started snatching their property and giving them like next to nothing for. And I remember like after we, you know, got to go back in the city and just kind of like survey what the homes were looking like, my grandmother, oh my God, my heart broke. Her house was leaning onto the house next door. And she was like, well, maybe we can go in and get some stuff. And my dad looks at her and was like, Mama, it's gone. And she just broke down. This is a home that she raised her children and her grandchildren in. And like my great aunt and her husband built that house from scratch. When I tell you, this is a neighborhood, a Black neighborhood in New Orleans, where these were the first areas where Black people could own property. And these people built their homes with their hands. And so there was no like replacing that. It was just really like, it was a wild time. And I felt for people younger than me, because I felt like I had just missed the foolery because I was in college. So things were different. I had my own space. It was almost lit because all of the New Orleans schools, they had to now come to like, we were like between Baton Rouge and Lafayette and Shreveport, honey, it was lit in 2005. Okay, in college, it was lit. But it was lit because we were all going through this same thing. And like it was just really like that year for college was probably.
That's bonding.
Yeah, it was crazy bonding time. And like just the world was so open to like all of us. You couldn't go anywhere anymore with like, if you said you was from New Orleans, anywhere in the world, like you were instantly popular. People were instantly opening their everything to you. And so like it was also just a really unique thing. I remember feeling for some of my cousins because they were seniors and like their senior year was like snatched from them. It was like, and like you said, you had whole families living in one hotel room or one family home for like the rest of the year. And it was just like that first holiday season, girl, I don't know if you remember, it was like.
Yeah. No, I remember.
It was really crazy. And to have this conversation now, Jessica, in the midst of COVID, I think is so timely, because I feel like on a global scale, we are experiencing a level of this.
The same stages of grief.
Yeah, it's so crazy. Like, you know, people will always tell you like live a little longer and like see the experiences. I just feel like, God, I feel like I've lived through so much. Because also, like, I was in high school when 9/11 happened. That was my freshman year of high school.
We're doing a 9/11 episode in a couple of weeks, so we're gonna talk about that. It's the 20th anniversary.
Yeah, and so I feel like it was just like these hits that I've experienced like in my very young age, because I'm just at the top of my 30s. I done been through some real big events. Yeah. And it's just like, it's wild. But Katrina was definitely one of those things that it was a major change and shift for me. And to be a young adult going through that was like, I feel like it grew us all up very quickly in a very different way. It took that last little bit of innocence that we could have had. It snatched it. And there was so much that was tragic around it, but there was so much beauty, I think, too, that like came out of that experience. Like, I am all for like communal, I'm gonna be careful with these words, but communal grief or communal trauma experiences.
Yeah.
Because there's something to be said when it happens to the collective and what it does to the collective conscious mind. I believe that is Mother Nature's way of auto-correcting, and it mentally, collectively forces us to move in a direction that otherwise we wouldn't have taken, because that is what humanity needed. That is what our collective in that area needed to be awakened for the next generation to continue to carry on and be fruitful. And so from that standpoint, I feel like it's a blessing that we were chosen to be the ones to like live through that experience in the age that we got to live through that experience, because it was so unique. And it's an experience that we all will talk about for the rest of our lives. And we can go back to those moments and it's like, it's there for us immediately. And it's a bonding experience that it's beautiful. It created a different kind of culture. Because we also remember, like, for people like us, we remember what the city was like, you know, pre-Katrina. It was very different. And I think about like the high school, the middle school experience that kids have now in New Orleans versus like when we were there. It's like night and day. And I hope some of that comes back, and I hope to be a part of bringing some of those things and some of those programs and experiences back. But there was such like a youth culture. Like, we had our own like clubs, and like going to Tag Gormley on the weekends and going to everybody's high school football games. Like, that was such a beautiful, awesome, unique experience. That changed after Katrina. It just is not how it was for us when we were there. It's different for sure, because I've been back since. It's just the culture has just shifted in a way. But yeah, I'm talking a lot, y'all, so I apologize.
No. This is important. This is important information.
Yeah.
So I know we kind of talked about this already, but did you in particular lose anybody during the storm at all?
I didn't lose any people. I didn't lose any people. I was blessed. And I don't, none of my friends, to my recollection, and I'm pretty sure I would remember, none of my friends lost people either, which is a blessing. That is definitely a blessing. We didn't lose any people. And at the end of the day, like, all other stuff is so replaceable. People are not. And
exactly,
such a blessing. No one was left behind. No one was even stuck in a home. I think too, because we had my grandparents who had gone through Betsy, and they had already done that experience. So for my family on both sides were always families. We evacuated every time they said get out. Like, I remember that being a thing my entire life. We never had family members that stayed, because the generation before had already gone through the thing of not staying. And so like, it was just ingrained in us from the, like, we go, take your valuables, like the things that are super important. Is like, we had one family bin always when we left. And we would pile the most important pictures of the most important things. We could only take one. And so that was always our routine from very young. And anything else, we would put them in plastic containers, seal them as best we could, and we would put it high up. So our family collectively, we had we had hurricane like protocol.
Yeah.
So some things were saved, like my grandmother's mother passed away in childbirth. And so the only photo my grandmother has is like this old, it's one of those photos that looks like a painting. That's how old my grandmother's, in her 90s. So her mother was born in the 1800s. And so she died giving birth to her. So this was the only picture that my grandmother had of her mother. And my aunt, she got the inclination the night before. She's like, I feel like we need to go get those pictures of like Aunt Vi and like her son and your mom, and let's wrap them up. Let's put them in store. We also had like a storage unit that we kept as a family that was really high up. And so they went and put those pictures, those really old pictures of our ancestors, away in like our storage unit, and that they were all sealed and they were on like the top floor. And so those are fine. And we're so happy because that's literally the only picture we have of my great grandmother. The only one. And so we still have that in the family. And so thankful for those protocols. But yeah, we didn't lose anybody, thankfully. And I don't know anyone that did lose anyone.
That's fortunate. That's so
yeah.
I'm so happy to hear that.